On this episode of the P&R Churchman, we're going to be talking about MNA, Ministry to North America, and in particular, Ruling Elder Mark Casson, who has changed positions within MNA, and he's going to tell us a little bit about what he's doing, what he's done, and his background. So, Mark, thanks for being on here first.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, George.
Absolutely. And so I learned of you because I don't know if By Faith carried an article about you or something, and I always have my spidey senses on when I see a ruling elder doing good stuff in the denomination, because that's what I try to do, is just highlight the work of ruling elders and churchmanship. And you work for an agency of our denomination. So will you tell us a little bit about your background, where you live, what church you're at, some family details, and how you came to work at MNA?
Sure. So I was born and raised in Western New York, not a Christian, wasn't raised in a Christian home. At the age of 20, I went to California with the Army. I was in Army intelligence. I know that's an oxymoron for some of your listeners. I was a linguist stationed at the Presidio of Monterey. Czech and Slovak were my languages. I graduated from that program and then committed a crime. And I found myself in the Monterey County Jail. I was facing life plus 14 years in the state of California, and I was potentially facing the death penalty from the Army. California had jurisdiction. Through the ministry of a Gideon, I was about 5 months in the county jail when a Gideon came into the cell block to do a Bible study. I got out to make a phone call. That's the only way I could get out of my cell, was to go to the Bible study. I tried to tune the guy out, and I learned that day that God's Spirit is stronger than my own, and I was converted. So the following week, I went to court. It was jury selection for my trial. I ultimately pled guilty. My first introduction to Christianity, I read the Pocket New Testament, the Psalms and Proverbs 6 times, cover to cover, over the course of the weekend. And on Monday morning, I went to court, talked to my attorney, and said, I'm going to plead guilty. To me, from the first days of my faith, Christianity is a rubber meets the road religion. You are faced with hard choices, and we try to honor God in those choices. So my attorney had told me she counseled me to not plead guilty. I might beat one or two of the charges, but I ended up, I was in a place where, to me, the rubber meets the road in our Christian faith, and we do what honors God regardless of the consequences. We don't really think about those.
So how long were you a Christian at that point?
4 days.
And you knew that already?
I had read the Pocket New Testament with the Psalms and Proverbs 6 times, cover to cover, over the course of a weekend. The one scripture I had memorized during that time was, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. I don't know why that jumped out at me, but that proverb stuck in my head. So we went in the courtroom, we pled guilty, and almost immediately, as though he were moved by the Holy Spirit, the prosecutor stood up. He amended the complaint against me, dropped 3 of the 4 charges, and I just got found guilty of charge 1, which was attempted premeditated murder, and I was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole. 6 weeks later, I received a letter from the U.S. Army reducing me in rank to private, discharging me under conditions other than honorable, but not dishonorable. So in God's amazing, wonderful providence, I don't have a dishonorable discharge on my record. I went to prison.
By the way, was any of that validating to your decision to try to be faithful to your understanding of what it means to walk as a Christian?
I suppose so, but it strengthened that. In other words, to me, as Christians, I know we all sin, but when we are faced with certain choices, we ought to always honor God. I always talk about when people are struggling financially and they stop giving to the church. I believe we ought to give even out of our poverty. When I was in prison, the most I ever made was $48 a month. I still gave money to the church to do the work of the church. And so I think that no matter what our situation is, we can give and honor God, even if it means I don't get an extra, my meals are smaller, or I don't know how to explain it, but they are difficult things sometimes that we are faced with, but that's what the Christian faith is for. We honor God and glorify him in those things. And I
Amen.
truly should still be in prison.
Mm.
I'm only out because of the grace of God. And if I were living in the Old Testament, I would have been executed. So, again, the grace of God, here I sit. So,
Yeah.
I'm very thankful. I go to prison for the next 15 years. I spend that time studying God's Word. My first chaplain was a Sovereign Grace Baptist. So he had all 50-something volumes of Spurgeon sermons behind his desk. And there were 5 of us that were Reformed on the prison yard at Corcoran, and we used to read a Spurgeon sermon out loud to one another 5 days a week. We took turns. So Tuesday was my day. We'd meet in the chapel and we'd read these sermons. So I took courses from what was then Reformed Bible College through correspondence. I think it's now Kuiper College up in Michigan, Grand Rapids. I took courses from RTS Charlotte while I was inside through correspondence. I love to read theology, so I've read Burkhoff cover to cover. I've read Hodge cover to cover. Our chaplain at Corcoran actually could translate everything Hodge left untranslated. So when he says Schleiermacher said, and there's a bunch of German, I had my chaplain translate that for me. And so I had a notebook that had all of Hodge translated, all those untranslated things. And it got taken in a cell search when I got to the new prison in Soledad. So that's lost. But in any event, I walked out of prison and granted parole in 2004. And I had met my future wife while I was incarcerated. We visited for about 2.5 years prior to my release. So I was released on February 19th, 2004. We were married in May 28th, 2004. So I'm coming up on 2 20-year anniversaries. And 10 days after my release, I went to Sierra View Presbyterian Church, a PCA church out in Fresno, California, and we never went anywhere else. The congregation loved me well. The pastor loved me well, Brian Peterson. He They called me to serve as a ruling elder there. I was ordained in 2006, and I served there until we left in 2013, and then I've been serving as a ruling elder at First Presbyterian Church in Chattanooga since 2015. And that's where we live now. We moved to Chattanooga. I have 2 daughters. Eliana is aged 15, and Joelle will be 12 in March.
Oh, praise God. You just told a testimony that I'm sure could take an hour to tell. You just told it in like 5 minutes. So thank you for sharing that. And how long have you been in Chattanooga?
So we came to Chattanooga in 2013. It was prison ministry that brought us here. So in 2005, I got a call from one of those guys that I used to read a Spurgeon sermon with at Corcoran. His name is Dean Marshall. And Dean was a PCA pastor, a teaching elder. And he was the head of Metanoia Ministries at the time. And he asked me if I would come on the board of directors. I didn't know what a director did, but I agreed to do it. A year later, they asked me to leave the board of directors and asked me to become the executive director. Again, I don't know what an executive director really did. I was a sales manager at a printing company. And so I said, yes, I will. The ministry was very small, mostly located in the tri-state area of North Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia. He was pastoring a small church in Virginia at the time. Then he moved down to North Carolina to a place called Lincolnton, which is northwest of Charlotte. And so over the next in 2008, we joined with Mission North America. We met them at the General Assembly that was in Orlando. They offered a position to me as a staff member. I accepted the position, and we came under MNA at the beginning of 2009.
So Metanoia prior to that wasn't under MNA?
No, it was a standalone 501c3. It started under the session of a PCA church in Escondido, and the session had oversight, but it did develop its own 501c3 status in 1996. And so I come into the scene in 2005.
Okay. I want to,
Yep.
Yeah, I want to talk about Metanoia, but I also want to because I don't think we said it. What's your current role at MNA now?
So my current role is effective of September 1st, 2023. I am the Ministry Engagement Director for Mission North America.
Okay.
Prior to that, I was the Prison Ministries Director for MNA through Metanoia from 2009 through 2023.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for listeners, we're going to get to what Mark's current role is and how, what that means for us as churches, or what that means for the PCA, and how he can serve us, and how we can help him. We'll get to that, but I also want to learn more about Metanoia Prison Ministries. And since Mark is fresh out of that, because I think this is an area that a lot of churches, it's sort of daunting. And I think a lot of churches kind of fall into it. Like, somebody asks them, their pastor, to go, hey, can you go visit so-and-so in prison? And it kind of happens that way, but there's a lot of good things happening in the PCA to help. I don't know whether it's best practices or just how to do this. And so go ahead, Mark, tell us about Metanoia.
Sure.
And continue your story. I know you were going somewhere with this.
So Metanoia developed a correspondence-based ministry, a discipleship ministry. All the courses are reformed. In fact, we have a partnership with this little ministry out of Florida you might have heard of, called Ligonier. I don't know if you've heard of them or not, but they've become pretty much famous since we partnered with them in 2010. We've kind of really lifted them up.
Wow, look at you.
So they've given us 18
how you said that with a straight face for as long as you were saying it was good.
Well, I joke whenever I speak at a church, I always say that to get a laugh. Obviously, they're the big ministry, but
so let me ask you, because I know obviously that's something Ligonier kind of has done. Mm-hmm. That is not that it's flying below the radar, but it's I guess you wouldn't normally guess that. And I have friends out of Briarwood that there's
Mitch Halbert.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah,
all right, so they're associated with Ligonier also, with their prison ministries down there in Birmingham, I think it is. Do you guys have any connection with them at all, or it's more like sharing?
Well, personally, I supported Mitch. I've given him a bunch of books for the seminary they have inside the prison in Bibb County. He's now the chaplain there, as well as being a pastor and helping out in other ministries. I mean, the guy's amazing. So Ligonier, we partnered with them on the correspondence ministry side, and they gave us 18 of the courses that you or I could take on their academy. Anyone could join Ligonier Academy. They have different tracks. So they have a history track, a theology track, a Bible track. And so we've taken those courses and put them in our format. And so a student could study with us for 15 or 20 years, going through our materials and then the Ligonier ministry materials. They also have given us many free Reformation study Bibles printed in paperback just for prisoners to give out, and we continue to do that. So we grew from this little ministry in the tri-state area that I mentioned to now serving prisoners in 49 out of 50 states, and they're being served by volunteers in 49 out of 50 states by the grace of God. And so Maine is the only place where we don't have either a volunteer or a prisoner, and I'm actually speaking there this weekend. So I'm hoping that we'll get at least one volunteer there, and then we'll have all 50 states volunteers. But it has been amazing to see the Lord work and hearts. People genuinely love doing the ministry. It takes about an hour a month. We provide all the answers and the postage. All we need is the person. So if you know people who are shut in, and they wonder, what can I do for the kingdom besides pray, which is important, they could serve as a Metanoia corresponding discipler, and we'd love to have them. We provide all the answers, so they don't have to be theologically astute. Families can do this together with their children if they're 9 or 10, 11 years old. The biggest thing we do is when you grade a lesson, you write an encouraging letter and you develop the relationship with the prisoner. It is relational ministry. One-on-one, you with the prisoner or your family with the prisoner, developing that relationship. And it's powerful. Love and remembering the prisoner is a very powerful thing in the life of the prisoner. The prison system is very dehumanizing. And our goal is to help rehumanize them and recognize the image of God that they bear, even in their sinful, being punished by the state.
So who's on the ground making that connection between prison and this program?
So how do we get prisoners? In other words, how do we get students? Yes. Several things. Our director of that ministry, who now is my wife, actually, it was Shelley Marshall for a long time. She sent out packets to chaplains, to every chaplain in the country. Parents write to us and say, my son is in prison. Do you have anything you could study? Or prisoners write to us. They hear about us through Ligonier. We get a lot of referrals from them. So all different ways. You hear about it from the guy next to you, or somebody out of the yard in the prison is doing this wonderful study where they have a personal corresponding discipler, and so they write to us, and we get referrals just from other prisoners. And so it's grown that way. We've over the last 15 years, we've served more than 7,500 prisoners around the country through that ministry. We also have in-person mentoring in certain places. So near Greenville, South Carolina, at a prison there. Here in the greater Chattanooga area, that's what brought me here. We have 100 plus mentors that go into the prison every other week for an hour and a half, and they mentor a prisoner. Some of them have been doing that for 10 or 11 years, in a couple of cases with the same person. Imagine the relationship you develop if you spend an hour and a half just talking with somebody every other week for 10 years.
Which presbytery? You're Tennessee Valley?
I'm in Tennessee Valley, yes.
Okay. Is this what Brad Isbell's involved in? He's a ruling elder in that presbytery.
No, not that I'm aware of. No,
Okay.
I know he's in the northern part of the presbytery up near Knoxville somewhere, I believe.
Okay. He often talks about prison ministry that he does. So I thought there was some. Yeah, you should.
Barry Smith is our regional director here. He's a ruling elder at North Shore Fellowship. And then our headquarters, Metanoia's headquarters, is here. I say our, I'm not in it anymore, but it's here. We just called a man named Lowell Ivy, who is a OPC ruling elder who's transferring into the PCA and Calvary Presbytery. He just started January 1st. So, but he's also a former prisoner, did about 15 years in the state of Texas, was converted there and went to Greenville Seminary. And he's a church planter in the OPC. He planted a church in Virginia Beach. Wonderful brother. I'm excited to see what the Lord will do in the ministry.
Praise God. We got an OPC guy coming our way. Okay. Very good. So if just on this program, if anybody who's hearing this wants to somehow get involved in it, who do they contact? Because you're not in that role anymore. So who do they contact, and what should they ask for?
Sure. There's the website for the ministry. The external website is metanoiaprisonministries.org. And so if they go there, they can download the corresponding discipler information form and fill it out. They can also join the prayer e-newsletter that goes out once a month. That'll pop up right when they go to the website. And if you fill that out, then you'll get a monthly e-newsletter from Lowell. They would want to go under the discipleship tab and then scroll down, and the form is right there. Sign up to become it. Right there it is. So there's also some videos on how to do the ministry, the importance and the need of the ministry. All of those things are there on the website. Very great, easy to navigate.
Great. That's super encouraging. Okay.
And if anybody would love to have me come to their church to share my testimony in Sunday school and et cetera, I'm glad to do that. It doesn't cost anything. And then I promote all the ministries of Mission North America. I used to come and just recruit people to serve with Metanoia, but there are obviously a bunch of other ministries that MNA engages in, and that's my new job, is to educate and equip the church in those various ministries.
Okay. So do you, is your position a position where you have to raise funding?
I do. I'm yes and no. I do not have to raise my own support like Lowell will for Metanoia, but I have agreed to help MNA, and I'm paid out of the general fund, and so I've agreed to visit churches and individuals to help raise the support with MNA in the general fund.
There you go. So if you wonder where your church askings go, if you give your askings to the different agencies, it goes to support guys like Mark. So good to know. So you'll come and speak at people's missions conferences if they want, or
Sunday schools. Yeah, whenever it's available for a church to have me. I have been doing it for many years. I love to do it. My excitement as a ruling elder is to help people. I love to see the light click on and someone say, hey, that's the ministry for me. I really want to do this. And it's been prison ministry by and large, but now the last few churches I've spoken at in the last quarter of last year, I talked about the general MNA ministries, and I see people, when I say ministry to state or chaplain's ministry or disaster response, people didn't know we had disaster response, and they're like, "Hey, I love using my chainsaw and things. So how do I get in touch with them?" So that's the whole thing. Is I think our job as elders is to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. And so some of that is showing them these things are available to you. You might want to start ESL at your church because you just realize that, a lot of people in your neighborhood don't speak English. So ESL is a great outreach ministry to share the gospel, that it's designed to share the gospel with people through education of English. So
Yeah,
excited
no
to see
doubt.
people get.
Yeah, definitely, no doubt. It's the church I came from in South Florida, Park Road Presbyterian Church, which is formerly was St. Andrews, but I assume they still have the ESL program. When I left 5 years ago, they'd have anywhere from 70 to 100 people from the community, and it ended up birthing a Hispanic ministry at the church that grew into its own worship services, and I think one of the most powerful things was it engaged so many volunteers who started out and they were hesitant because, how am I going to teach language stuff and all that? But it's like, no, just come and serve and love on the people. And to see people that were initially just providing perhaps supplies or helping do refreshments and food, and then they became assistants in the classes and then to teach their own classes. And so from a pastor's perspective, I love to see how a program like ESL actually disciples our own people in how
Right.
to serve and reach out and share their faith with people that are really lovely to be with and grateful for what you're helping them with. So
Yeah, ESL especially is a very organic ministry within the life of a church. Every one that there is different from a different churches based on what they have going on. But it is, suddenly someone thinks, well, I really can't teach, but they need somebody that's going to help set up the tables each week. And so I'll use my gifts in that regard to do that type of stuff,
right.
or coordinate who's going to bring meals or snacks, or what rooms people are meeting. All those types of things suddenly come to life, and it helps the congregation truly live out and help people use their gifts for the kingdom.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. So in your current role, you said it's ministry engagement. What did you call it?
Ministry Engagement Director is my role.
Okay. I'm
And so
actually going to see. Go ahead.
well, I have an internal role at MNA, and I have an external role. So the internal role is I'm coming alongside the other engagement ministries to help them with their with casting vision, setting goals that are aligned with MNA's overall goals, budgeting, expansion, those types of things. So I'm involved. I'm coming alongside 11 ministries that MNA has. Um, and that's the internal side. On the external side, I'm one of the promotional people for MNA. I'm going to visit presbyteries, as I say, coming soon to a presbytery near you, or to a church, to just educate our people on who MNA is, what we do, and what our vision is. Many people in our pews, everybody knows MTW because chances are every single PCA church just about supports an MTW missionary, so they know who MTW is, but they don't necessarily know MNA. And so my goal is to educate them on MNA and what we do, and then let them know. A lot of ruling elders don't go to General Assembly. A lot of pastors don't. So I'm going to be at conferences and other places where pastors are and elders are, so that I can set up a table and talk to them about the offerings of MNA, the ministries that are available to them. And how their people could be engaged. So,
Well, that's great. And so if anybody out there is thinking of their upcoming presbytery meetings, Mark is in Tennessee, Chattanooga, very close to North Georgia, and he sounds like he wants to get out on the road and try some food from different places. And so, yeah, I think you're right. I think most people, when they think of MNA, probably the first thing, an immediate thing that comes to mind is church planning, and there's obviously a high focus on that. But y'all offer a lot more than just that.
So, as you know, or as you may know, MNA set a vision. We cast a vision last year that we would like to see the PCA increase by 50% by 2033, which effectively takes us from 1,932 current churches to 3,000 churches, just about. That's our goal, to plant just over 1,000 churches. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to come alongside
Yes, I want to
presbyteries.
know that. I do want to know that.
Well, number one, we're going to pray, because when I heard the vision, you asked me in the email about how I came into this role. Um, Truly, God pulled me into this role. I felt it. I felt the strongest internal call I've ever had, other than to marry my wife. This calling from God was, I couldn't not do it. And I approached my boss at MNA, Murray Lee, and we talked about it. He interviewed me. I met with Murray and Irwin later, and ultimately they offered me the position. I'm excited by this vision because we can't do it. PCA cannot do it,
That's right.
but God can.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The same God that told Jesus, or told Peter to walk on water, is the same God who is the Lord of the PCA. And so I believe that if we all work together in a loving way, that God will honor it. And I think it's a beautiful vision of increasing the PCA and the Reformed faith in North America. And so helping presbyteries and churches, providing resources for them to plant more churches, that's one thing. But also, we want to strengthen the health of our current churches. Somewhere between 30, maybe 25 and 40 churches a year close in the PCA. Well, can we stop those? Can we strengthen them? Can we come alongside them? I don't know the church that's perfectly healthy, and so vitality is important. And I believe that there really are probably multiple, but I think there are three elements that are very important in the health of a church: the sound preaching of the word. There's got to be prayer. People have to be praying. And I believe the people need to be engaged outwardly in their community in some way. It's not just writing a check for John Smith to be in China as a missionary, but it's actually being engaged in your community and serving whoever's around you, in whatever context that is. And that's where I think that the engagement ministries of MNA come in, and we can say, hey, are you right down the road from a prison? We can help you get going there. Or do you have people that would want ESL? Do you have a disaster that happens in your presbytery? We can help you, right? Like those are the ministries we want to talk to people about, and so it excites me. But we also want to enfold new like-minded congregations into the PCA. See that happen. So there's a plan to help our presbyteries and our churches achieve this vision that I think is glorious to the Lord. Maybe in 2033 we'll look back and say, why didn't we shoot for 1,500, Lord? Why did we only shoot for 1,000?
Right. Well, I did email Irwin, and he was kind enough to get back to me, and I said, I love the vision. What's the plan? Because, and I don't know what the percentages are of small presbyteries and large presbyteries, but with 88 presbyteries, if every presbytery planted one church a year for 10 years, well, now you're at 880, so you still and obviously some of the bigger presbyteries have many more church plants than just one, but I know, like, I'm in a small presbytery, and Piedmont Triad, we have one church plant going now. If I understand right, we have another one pretty soon, but we haven't had a new church in our presbytery in years, and so it's how does, is MNA working on a way to, because you can't do it for us, but there has to be like tools and resources or some kind of path for to achieve that,
So yeah, let me give you a couple of thoughts on that if I can. This weekend I was in two places in Virginia. I was in the Blue Ridge Presbytery, where they don't even have an M&A committee. It's a church planting committee. And then I went over to Richmond, where the Metro Richmond Church Planting Network met on Sunday evening for the first time. And their vision is to plant 10 churches over the next 10 years. So that's not even Presbytery wide. That's just the Metro Richmond area. And there were 31 people there, 32 people from a variety of churches talking about different models to do church planting. But I believe the first thing is the presbyteries have to come together in prayer about it. They start an actual intentional prayer about how do we plant churches. But then as I've been listening and thinking about this, you could take, if there were a geographical area, now I know in some presbyteries they're very big, right? Metro Richmond's not a large area. So this model would work for them. But if they could each church put out the word over the next 6 months that they want people interested in church planting to come and pray with them, and let's say each church could give up 5 members, suddenly 20 people, or 20 churches times 5 members, that's 100 members. That's not a church plant, that's a congregation.
That's right.
So now you find a pastor to come alongside. Now here's an idea too. How about using ruling elders? A ruling elder could be licensed. The requirements for licensure are not substantive according to the BCO. They have to be tested in their basic knowledge of certain categories, as you know. But a licensure is good for 4 years. So what if a ruling elder were licensed and could lead a group of people to do the preaching, and you bring in the people from the presbytery to do the sacraments? And now suddenly we aren't necessarily looking for guys sending a guy to seminary, having him come back, that type of thing. It's out of the box. People might think that's wild. This is not an approved M&A method. These are ideas I've been coming up with just over the course of the last couple of months as I've been thinking through some of these questions. How do we do them? How about bringing seminary into your presbytery and having teachers? There are, LAMP is an approved General Assembly way of doing things, but there's also one called MINTS out of Florida, Miami International Theological Seminary. Well, we use MINTS in prisons. BTS is in a prison right now. Well, if we think of a presbytery in a certain way, what if a presbytery, if the pastors in the presbytery, 5 or 6 or 7 of them could band together, they could teach a couple of courses per cycle, and a guy could get his degree through one of those organizations in 2 to 3 years, and then he stands for life. But he stays in the presbytery. You guys are investing in him in the presbytery, and then he gets ordained and licensed in the presbytery to plant a church.
What I love about what you're saying is, because I've been thinking through this a lot lately. Also, I'm in Piedmont Triad Presbytery, and our church and our presbytery has an overture before MNA to draw the boundary to put us in Catawba Valley Presbytery, just because we're more similar to the rural and small town churches in Catawba Valley as opposed to the churches in the city centers of Winston-Salem and Greensboro and their suburbs. And Catawba Valley has a LAMP program, and they have a few REs going through it. And what I love about the model, and I was a ruling elder. Well, I was a congregant who became a deacon, who became a ruling elder, who ended up becoming a teaching elder. And I really didn't want to leave that church in South Florida, but the Lord called me out. It was just, we loved that church. But my point is, I love the idea, and that's probably the way it should be, that churches and presbyteries are developing in men and seeing men develop and helping them develop. I understand we have to hire guys out of seminary and for calls to move from places to places, but what if we had really good pipelines within our presbyteries for this very purpose, and with the commitment to that region and area, such that, exactly like you said, then you're training somebody in the area, you're using programs like LAMP. I'm familiar with MINTS, BTS. I love. I'm doing my DMin with them. I'm friends with Ike, and I understand Murray Lee was actually on the board there at BTS. But like you said, they're in the prisons. They have cohort-based models and satellite things going on, and the flexibility is there to get guys trained and training. And affordable. I mean, LAMP is affordable. BTS is affordable.
Yes.
I think MINTS is affordable. And so not to replace, Westminster and Greenville and RTS, which I mean they're awesome, but I think we need ways to get guys ordained who already have full-time jobs and trying to, or like you said, the ruling elder who wants to take classes and learn more. And I interview people on this that are ruling elders that have actual MA or MDiv degrees. I'm pretty impressed with the desire of ruling elders, and that, of course, was my story, to continue to grow in their knowledge of theology and doctrine and everything else. But I think perhaps what you just shared is, again, this vision that for these ruling elders who are churchmen, who are involved, who are, have continued their studies, like, have you considered helping in your presbytery to for the purpose of church planting or other ways to expand the church within your presbytery? So.
Yeah, I think for me, so when I was in Blue Ridge Presbytery this last weekend, there was a ruling elder who went for licensure, um, and he does plan to go to seminary and go that route. But that's when the light clicked on for me, that because they said at the presbytery, I think licensure is good for 4 years. So you know, a church plant's usually 3 to 5 years. So if you could get a guy in a sweet spot, and several churches were interested in putting people into that and working cooperatively, then that can add to the model of ways we do church plants. That man can preach the gospel regularly in that pulpit, and someone else will administer the sacraments, and then you're ultimately looking for a pastor and not a planter once the church is ready to particularize, depending on how it goes. But it takes obviously a commitment from the ruling elder, and in some cases the ruling elder can be bivocational if he can find the time to work on his sermons and work his other job. So just they're just different ways to do it, and in different contexts are going to be important. For example, Northern New England. I was at a church planting summit last week in Charlotte, and a guy from Northern New England, a ruling elder, said, it's extremely difficult to find somebody come out of RTS Charlotte or Orlando who wants to go up to Maine or New Hampshire to plant a church. So I said, well, bring the seminary to them. Use one of these other models and have the seminary be involved in that person's training. Because then, if you think about it, if all your professors that taught you your studies are the people that are going to examine you on the floor of presbytery, how beautiful is that? Like, they know where you are strong and where you are weak, and they're there to encourage and help. So yeah, to me, we just, as a denomination and as presbyteries and as churchmen, we need to think of ways to make sure the men are qualified, but also to get people praying about and latch on to the vision, because it is a beautiful vision, I believe, of expanding the PCA.
Well, even what you were saying about New England, I can imagine that would be a struggle. And I remember it may have been a Presbycast episode, PCA podcast, but where they were talking about rural church planting and the difficulty in finding church planners for true rural communities that have towns of, in the triple digits or something, because you go to seminary and you want to make a livable wage, and it's
right.
Not the most attractive thing to do. And yet, like, they were talking about ways to raise up from within the communities, people who are already living there, already committed in those areas, but you need creative seminary solutions for them. And again, that's where things like LAMP and MINCE and BTS come in. And yeah, I think
the possibility of a circuit pastor. Let's go back to the 1800s and having a pastor who serves 3 churches, right? He preaches in 3 churches every Sunday, or 2 churches on a Sunday, because those churches are too small to find to support a full-time pastor in that rural community, and there's not much other work for him to do. But 2 churches he could do if he's willing to preach twice on a Sunday, and churches are willing to be flexible in their schedules and such. I think that's something that Corey Pelton is doing in the Northwest Georgia and Tennessee Valley. Is he's traveling around to these different churches and ministering and such. So just again, context will help determine the model we use.
But I think, you know, I didn't tell you I was going to ask you that, but you kind of led us down that road. And I think you actually gave us a substantive thing, like, because, you know, if somebody asked us, we have 3 pastors here, we are pretty busy. If somebody asked us, would you help with this church plant? Now we are working toward that, and I guarantee we will, but you know, it is hard to leave the work you're immediately called to do that. But maybe if there was more of a mindset that this isn't just for the TE, this is for the REs, and that might be again another way that REs can discern their own calling and how the Lord would desire to grow that in them. And certainly presbyteries have, you know, I mean, we have 3 TEs on our session, but we have 11 ruling elders, you know. It's like,
so I would suggest that if a church, if the presbytery wants to do a church planting cooperative, they want to work together, all the churches together, I would recommend, or I suggest, that ruling elders be highly involved. I would suggest that women be involved in the reason in the planning. And the reason I say that is because maybe a woman's going to play the piano or sing for the church plant and wants to be involved with her family in that regard. There are people who want to go and be the members of a church plant to see the thing grow, and they can use their gifts in administration. Maybe she'll help set up the bulletins because the planter is not that good at that, right? Like, so finding who those people are in each congregation and then cultivating that and sending them to the presbytery at a higher level, in my mind, is a way to work cooperatively. And that's another issue that I think MNA wants to see. We want to, you know, if we're honest, we have a lot of fighting in our denomination. We have a lot of fighting within our presbyteries, right? It's truthful.
yes.
I'm being honest, but we have so much more in common than we have. And that's one of the things that I got out of prison. You know, there is no Presbyterian church in prison. There's a Christian group that meet in a chapel. And so for years, I was the only Reformed guy on the yard. Can you imagine being 120 Christians and you're the only Calvinist? What kind of arguments can you get in there, right?
Yeah.
And so I was so thankful when the Lord brought one other like-minded brother. And then over time, there were others that came through Bible studies and other things. So all that to say, when Fred Marsh, who was the associate coordinator for MNA, when I was offered the position, he asked me, he said, you know, there are basically a couple of main camps in the PCA. Can you reach across those aisles? And I'm like, Fred, I can reach across denominations. I can my closest brothers aren't Presbyterian. They're Baptist guys. So, you know, but I think we need to learn from the prisoners that, you know what, the real fight is between the Christian and the world. We are to be one in Christ, and if we can cultivate that, if MNA can help cultivate that in North America, I think we'll become healthier as a denomination and attractive as a denomination to people.
Well, definitely a good and timely word. Are you going to be at General Assembly? I assume you will be.
Yes, I've been, by God's grace, to everyone since 2009.
There you go. All right, so people can connect with you there. Will you be in the MNA booth or just out and about? Okay.
MNA booth.
Yeah, so again, people can connect with you there. I would love, as MNA is working on this 1,000 new churches in 10 years, for more ideas like what you just shared. And maybe they are, like you mentioned, you were at the church planning thing at RTS Charlotte. That's my backyard. Had a lot of friends there actually. And I don't know, do you go to some of these, like I know there's the Carolina Collective between North and South Carolina where they're meeting.
That'll be more Chris Vogel, who is the
Yes.
MNA Church Planting and Vitality Coordinator. I will go to as many things as I can, like in different conferences, things like that, because I want to reach the ruling elders and teaching elders that may not be at General Assembly. But yeah, church planting is becoming more and more exciting to me.
I really appreciate the direction this went, because I do think you gave presbyteries and REs, you know, some good things to think about how they can help in church planning or any of the ministries of MNA. At MNA, we love MNA. We support Darren Stone. Darren Stone's a close friend of mine. He is a ministry to state in North Carolina. We have long been involved with disaster relief with MNA. We support Steve. Is it Steve Jessen? Because I know he's new there now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Steve Jessen's just new with last year.
Right. We added him to this year's budget, and Alan Foster's a good friend to our church, and he's with MNA. So love what you guys are doing. Any final thoughts or words?
Well, would it be appropriate or okay for me to just mention the ministries that I am?
Absolutely, that's what I want. Yes, because again, demystify it for us.
Yeah. So the ministries are these. There's a ministry called Bent Tree, which is run by David Wilson, who is a former church planter. It's a ministry for pastors. So if you're listening to this and your pastor is going through a difficult time, send them to Bent Tree, and they have conferences and they put together cohorts to come alongside and minister to pastors. Of course, we have disaster response. The big boy in the room. They're present in every presbytery. Because there are disasters from coast to coast and north to south, right? That's headed by Arkley Hooton. We have Engaging Disability with the Gospel, which is headed by Ashley Belknap. And that will help your church to engage with those in your church who may have various disabilities, not just physical, but emotional, mental. And they're a wonderful ministry. We have a Second Career Ministry. If you are retired from your first career and you want to do something with the Lord, they will help match you up with a church planter or a church that might need certain skills or whatever it is. Reach out and they will put you to work.
That's for teaching elders?
That's for anybody who's retired. Metanoia availed of a couple of different people through Second Career. One of them became a regional director for us for a short time. We have a short-term mission. So if you are somebody who wants to go on a missions trip, but your church isn't putting one together, you can reach out to the short-term missions and they will send you on a trip somewhere in North America. We have LAMP, the Leadership and Ministry Preparation, headed by Brian Kelso. If you're a pastor and you want to start training men in your congregation, reach out to them. It's a great ministry.
So Brian was a pastor at my former church. I mean, before me, but he was a church plant out of our former church. So you know Brian well. Yeah, I love to see, because LAMP was big in South Florida, but now I'm seeing it in rural North Carolina.
Everywhere.
And it's everywhere.
It has really grown over the last decade and a half. It's been wonderful. We do have Ministry to State. There are both National Ministry to State, which is headed by Chuck Garriott, and they have regional guys like Darren Stone in North Carolina. They have somebody out in Montana. They have other regional capitals where they have people. If you're an elder or a pastor and you want to be involved with Ministry to State, involved to the ministries you could do it part-time and visit legislatures in your state capital, then please reach out to them. We have, the MNA Chaplains Ministries. Those are headed by Dr. Jim Carter, and they are both military, and they're the military endorser for the PCA, but also they have civilian chaplains in hospitals, prisons, other places.
And Jim's also was from South Florida, or at least part of his time.
We have Metanoia Prison Ministries, which is headed up by Lowell Ivy. They're a great ministry to be involved in. Immigrant and refugee ministries. If you have questions about immigrants and refugees in your area, you can reach out to Pat Hatch. She has spent her life in that area. We have ESL ministry, which is headed up by Nancy Doerr. That ministry helps churches set up ESL learning centers. They train people to do the trainings and be involved in that. And then we have MNA Mercy Ministries, which is headed up by Robert Blevins. And it's exactly what it sounds like, helping your church be merciful to the people in your community.
That's phenomenal.
Those are the ministries that I'm overseeing and coming alongside of.
Yeah, this is the first time I've looked on the website for that, So if people are watching, I mean, this is recorded, it'll be on iTunes and everything else, but if you watch on YouTube, you'll just see all these ministries and offerings.
So I would also say, as you're scrolling through there, if somebody who's listening to this knows somebody who's Haitian, connect them to the Haitian Ministries coordinator, because they're planting Haitian Creole-speaking churches here. They're you know, those types of connections. We have Korean-speaking networks. We have, you know, the PCA has a dozen, I don't know, 10 or 12 Korean-speaking presbyteries. So if you know somebody in your neighborhood who's Korean, who you know, you can connect them to them, and they might be able to find a church. I was blown away. I lived in Fresno for a couple of years before I knew there was a PCA church there, that the Korean-speaking church was PCA. Like we don't even know sometimes those churches in our own neighborhoods or areas that are our own denomination. Hispanic ministries, you know, they're trying to plant Hispanic-speaking churches here, and so there's a plethora of those ministries, the cross-cultural ministries.
Yeah, praise God. I was excited. I interviewed the host committee for GA in my last episode, and they were talking about the Thursday night worship service will be hosted by and all by the Korean presbytery that is partnering with this General Assembly. So it'll be the first one. Yeah, it'll be great.
Yeah.
All right, Mark, I know you got to go. So if you are
thanks
back,
so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you being willing to do it. I remember when I first emailed you, you said, "How do I know you?"
Well, you don't always get those emails, right? I don't know. So
yeah, I know. I guess it's harder for you to get an audience, and I was happy to give you one. But if you're through the area of Winston-Salem or Charlotte, anyway, you want some barbecue, stop by. I'm happy to see you and talk to you and see what else you got going on. Otherwise, I'll see you at GA.
All right, sounds great. Thanks, brother.
You're welcome. Thank you.